Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video we got another news and rumor video to discuss. We're looking at some signings from our past couple of days, some injury updates, some waiver updates, plus we got some trade rumors involving the Senators, Sabres, Kraken, Hurricanes, and the San Jose Sharks. We'll go to all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the Internet Hockey Channel. Before we begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe below. Thank you all your support. Would never be able to without you guys. We're on the road to 500 subscribers, so if you haven't already, hit that like button down below. And don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below. Would love to hear your guys' opinion on this and have it back and forth with you. So love to hear your guys' thoughts down in the comment section below. But as usual, we've got some more signings to talk about to begin off this news and rumor video. So we saw two signings from our past handful of days. So we're going to discuss both these signings here. First, we saw the Ottawa Senators sign RFA forward Ridly Greig. Greig, who's a solid young prospect for the Senators, has worked out really well. Started out in the NHL level, I think, last year on a full-time role. Worked out really well, especially as a 3C with guys like Pinto out for the first half of the year and Norris prerogatively out with injuries. But he's worked out really well this year as like a solid third-line winger. He signs a 4-year contract extension with the Ottawa Senators with an AV of $3.25 million. This is a pretty good deal in my opinion. Like, I'm a Senators fan, so I think this is really good value for Greig. He is a former first-round pick, 28th overall back in the 2020 draft. He's worked out phenomenally as like a solid middle six forward. I think he could eventually be a solid second line forward. He can put up points. He's a very rough and tumble, hard to play against forward. He provides that physical aspect that the Senators have not had a whole bunch of over the past couple of years. So I think Greig's a really good fit. So far this year, has 6 goals and 7 assists, 13 points in 40 games, after he had 13 goals and 26 points in 72 games last year. So he's on pace to have right around the same point total as last year, between 25 and 30 points at around 10 to 15 goals. So I think eventually he could be a solid 40, maybe even 50 point player and put it maybe 20, 25 goals per season. So I think this could be a really good pickup there for the Senators. 3.25 with the cap going up for a solid young middle six forward is not bad at all. And I think this could be eventually, if Greig continues his trajectory, a really good steal for the Ottawa Senators. So all in all, this is a pretty good signing. They get one of the RFA business done before the offseason hits. And honestly, I think this is a really good pickup there for Ottawa. So Sens, to get some of the RFA business done, have signed Greig to a 4-year deal with AV of $3.25 million that'll be going to start next year. And with the way Greig's playing right now, I think this is a really good deal coming off his DLC, so pretty good stuff there for Ottawa. And the other signing was an interesting one. The Columbus Blue Jackets, who signed Zach Aston-Reese to a 1-year deal in training camp to help their team sort of round out that forward group, has actually done well enough to earn himself a contract extension. Aston-Reese, who didn't have an over great season last year, playing 3 games at the NHL level with Detroit, was mostly an AHL player, putting up 14 goals and 30 points in 61 AHL games, basically played his entire season over the AHL. This year came into Columbus as sort of like a bomb 6 forward to sort of help round out that team's bomb 6, but has done actually quite well, putting up 4 goals, 11 points in 43 games. This looked quite good for the Blue Jackets. So he gets a 1-year contract extension with AV of $725,000, so it's another league minimum deal. Like we said before, the 1-year contracts that are signed in the offseason can't be extended until January 1st. This is one of those cases, but still, this is a very fantastic deal in my opinion for Aston-Reese. I think he should continue to be a solid bomb 6 forward, solid 4th line guy. Maybe at some point it's a healthy scratch for the Blue Jackets once they get healthy enough, but he's a solid serviceable bomb 6 forward. And if they have enough healthy bodies at the start of next season, he can be buried in the minors. So this is a pretty good deal in my opinion for the Jackets as they sign Aston-Reese to a 1-year league minimum deal. So some pretty good signings from our past couple of days is Ridly Greig signs the extension in Ottawa and Zach Aston-Reese signs the extension in Columbus. So some interesting signings from our past couple of days. Next, we're going to a couple of injury updates from our past couple of days. So back over on Saturday, we saw Aaron Ekblad miss Saturday's game with an undisclosed injury and will miss at least the next couple of games. So that's a bad blow there for the Panthers to lose a solid top 4 defenseman at Ekblad. Well, Jonah Gadgerich will not travel with Florida on their upcoming road trip and will miss at least the next 2 games as well. So Gadgerich and Ekblad are both suffering injuries right now. So bad to say both those guys are injured right now, but hopefully they won't miss too much time. It could be back in the not too distant future, but still some bad injury blows to lose a bottom 6 forward and a top 4 defenseman. Washington's Charlie Lindgren left Friday's game with upper body injury and was placed in injury reserve. So he's going to miss at least the next couple of games for the Capitals, if not maybe a little bit longer. So bad blow there for Washington. Lindgren's been a really good complementary piece to Logan Thompson this year, so to lose him for any sort of period of time is going to be awful. So interesting injury update there. Linus Ullmark skated on Friday for a first time since sustaining his injury, but has no timetable for his return. So it's good to see that Ullmark is starting to skate, and hopefully he won't be out for too much longer, but he is going to be out for the next little bit, so that's a bad blow there for the Senators. Then we saw Montreal's David Savard return to game action on Saturday after missing 4 games with upper body injury. So Savard had been out for quite some time, so good to see a solid veteran top 4 defenseman get back in the lineup for the Canadians. Toronto's Anthony Stolarz should get back to skating at some point this week from his injury and should still be probably out for a couple more weeks, but it's good to see him potentially start to skate not just in the future. Well, Jake McCabe has started skating over the weekend, but still has no timetable for his current return. So just like Allmark, he's skating, which is great news, but still no timetable for a return, which is awful news there for Toronto. Chicago's Alec Martinez, who had been out for over a month with a face injury, was activated off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Saturday. So great news there for the Hawks to get Alec Martinez back into the lineup, while Connor Murphy, who hasn't played in 2025 so far this year due to a groin injury, was placed in injury reserve. So it's a bad blow there for the Hawks. Murphy's been a solid defensive player for this year for the Hawks, so to see him go down with an injury and be placed in injury reserve is not really great, but great news to see Martinez get back for the Hawks. Then in San Jose, Klim Kostin, who was injured Friday with lower body injury, and Nikolai Kovalenko, who had missed a few games recently with upper body injury, have both been placed in injury reserve. So Kostin's been a solid 4th line guy. Kovalenko, since coming over from Colorado, has been pretty good as the middle 6 forward. So to lose those 2 guys is not overly great, but the Sharks did activate a couple of guys, as Cole Grunstrom, who had missed 2 weeks with undisclosed injury, and Jake Walman, who had missed a couple of weeks with a lower body injury, had both been activated and returned to game action on Saturday. So great news there for the Sharks to see those 2 guys get back into game action, as Walman, who's a solid top 4 defenseman and one of the better Sharks defensemen this year, and Grunstrom, who's a decent middle 6 forward, both been able to get back in the lineup. So really great stuff there for San Jose. Scotch Wedgwood, who has missed 5 games with a lower body injury, has been activated and returned to the lineup for the Avalanche. That's great news there for Colorado to see Scott Wedgwood get back into the lineup for Colorado. Well, Ivan, who had missed a few weeks with the injury, was activated off of injury reserve and sent back to the AHL. So his time in the NHL, for at least the time being, has come to an end. While Valeri Nichushkin, who has missed 6 games with a lower body injury, has suffered a setback and may be a little bit longer before his return. So bad blow there for the Avalanche that Nichushkin may be out a little bit longer and that Ivan's been sent down to the minors after his injury. But good to see that Scott Wedgwood's back, and that should be a really good boost to their goaltending tandem. Then Pittsburgh's Evgeny Malkin, who had missed 3 games with upper body injury, was placed in injury reserve. So a bad blow there for the Penguins to lose Evgeny Malkin. But Philip Tomasino, who had missed 4 games with a lower body injury, was activated off of injury reserve and got back into game action. So great news to see Tomasino, who's been fitting in quite well since being acquired from Nashville over in November, be activated and get back into game action for Pittsburgh. But bad to see Malkin, who's a solid second line center, go down with an injury. So bad stuff there. Shane Gostisbehere, who has missed 7 games with an upper body injury, was activated off of injury reserve and returned to game action on Sunday. So really great news there for the Hurricanes to see Gostisbehere get back off of injury reserve. While Semyon Varlamov, who is currently suffering with an injury, should return to practice at some point this week. So good to see Varlamov might be nearing a return, but bad news to see that he's still going to be out for at least a little bit of time. So some interesting injury updates from our past couple of days. Those are all of them. Good to see guys like Tomasino, Gostisbehere, Walman, and Savard all get back into game action, and good to see them all return for their teams. But bad news to see guys like Lindgren, Ekblad, Kovalenko, and Nichushkin all be injured or suffer a setback, and hopefully they won't be out for an overly long period of time. But some interesting injury updates from our past couple of days. Next, we'll go over to a quick waiver update. So we got a couple of interesting waiver updates from our past couple of days. Back over on Sunday, we saw 2 players be placed on waivers. That was Canucks defenseman Erik Brannstrom, as well as Boston Bruins bomb 6 forward Marc McLaughlin. Now, Brannstrom was acquired just before training camp ended by the Vancouver Canucks from Colorado. He worked out already as like an offensive third pair defenseman, had a couple of goals and a little bit of points with the Canucks, but obviously with the Canucks getting a little bit healthier with Ronick and Hughes now back, they didn't need Brannstrom at the NHL level, and he's sort of fallen out of favor, so they placed him on waivers. He is a former first-round pick from a couple of years ago, so I thought there would have been a chance, especially with him being on the younger side of things, that a team would have claimed him. When it comes to McLaughlin, he's been a call-up option a couple of times over the past few years. He can work on a 4th line, but he's been mostly an AHL player, so I thought he would probably clear. But with his age, once again, I thought there was a chance that maybe our team or two could have taken him. But both guys wound up clearing. Brannstrom in Vancouver, which I'm a little bit surprised by, and McLaughlin in Boston, which I'm not as surprised by. So interesting waiver updates there, but Brannstrom cleared waivers by Vancouver, surprisingly, and McLaughlin in Boston also cleared waivers. And then over on Monday, we saw 3 players be placed on waivers. That was Ben Jones and Devin Shore in Minnesota, as well as Gage Goncalves in Tampa. Goncalves had been called up to be a solid bomb 6 forward while the Bolts were running through some injuries, but with them getting a little bit healthy, they didn't really need him. Same thing with the Wild, they're getting a little bit healthier. Jones and Shore were called up right when they started to run into a lot of injury trouble, so there's no need for either of those guys to be at the NHL level for Minnesota. Ben Jones has been basically an NHL forward his entire career up until this point, so I was expecting him to clear. Devin Shore has been up and down over the NHL and AHL over the past couple of years. With him being a serviceable bomb 6'4", I thought there was a chance someone could have claimed him. When it comes to Goncalves, just like Jones, has been basically a career AHL player, and even though he's on the younger side, I think so he will probably clear too. Well, all three of them did wind up clearing earlier today, so I'm not too surprised that Goncalves and Jones wound up clearing. A little bit surprised Shorty, because I thought there could have been a team or two out there who could have claimed Shore as like a solid bomb 6 option, but all three do wind up clearing and have all been sent to the AHL. So some interesting waiver updates in the past couple of days, as Jones and Shore in Minnesota, Goncalves in Tampa, McLaughlin in Boston, and Brannstrom in Vancouver have all cleared waivers and have all been sent down to their team's AHL affiliates. So some interesting waiver updates from our past couple of days. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. First, we're going to start over here with the Buffalo Sabres again. Now, we recently got some reporting from Lance Lysowski, who's a really connected Buffalo Sabres insider, and he was talking about the Sabres in one of his recent articles, and he was talking about Dylan Cozens specifically, and he says that even though there's been a ton of trade rumors around him, and even though a lot of people have been putting him on the trade bait boards, Dylan Cozens is not being shopped by the Buffalo Sabres. He says that the Sabres have no interest at this point in time in moving on from Dylan Cozens, and it makes perfect sense. He's a solid second line center, cost control for a couple of years' time. According to Lysowski, he says that the reason there's so much trade chatter around Dylan Cozens right now is because he's not having an overly great season, as he only has 9 goals and 21 points in 43 games and a -17 rating, which is one of the lowest on the Buffalo Sabres. And given his low production, a lot of teams have been trying to swoop in and sort of take him at low value to sort of have a really good steal of a deal from Buffalo, with Buffalo sort of in turmoil right now, being the last team in the Eastern Conference again. So that's the whole reason why Cozens is coming up so much in trade rumors. It's not that the Buffalo Sabres want to move him, it's that there's a lot of teams out there who are trying to get Cozens at sort of a really good steal of a deal to sort of make out really well and get Cozens, and hopefully he plays better in their organizations than he's playing in Buffalo right now. So according to Lysowski, he says that unless there's some sort of major spectacular trade offer that knocks the socks off of Buffalo, they're not going to trade him, and they are definitely not shopping Cozens. So interesting note there, but that definitely sounds like Buffalo is not shopping Cozens. The reason why Cozens is being mentioned as a trade chip right now is because a lot of teams are trying to get him at low value, and unless there's an offer that really blows the Sabres away, I don't think they'll even consider moving Cozens. And personally, I agree with that. Like I said before, I've said this multiple times, Cozens is a really good second line center. You don't get your hands on many of these types of players, so even though he's having a really down year, I would not trade Cozens, and I would keep him in Buffalo. So we're gonna have to wait and see where this winds up going, but Lysowski does say the Sabres are not shopping Cozens, and the trade rumors are just because a lot of teams are trying to get him a low value, so we'll have to wait and see where that goes. Next, we went to Carolina Hurricanes. Now, we talked about this a couple of months ago, it might have been a month or two ago, and how Frank Seravalli was talking about the Carolina Hurricanes. He's a very connected insider, knows a lot of what's going on, and Seravalli said that the Hurricanes have a really good opportunity here to be sort of playing the waiting game when it comes to the goaltending market, because after Blackwood was acquired by Colorado, they were really the only team who was in need of a goaltender, and Seravalli said that with all the goaltending prices so high, they could wait until closer to the trade deadline when the prices are a little bit lower, and it would make sense to try and make some sort of a move. Well, Seravalli was recently talking about this again and said that with Frederik Andersen back on the ice now for the Hurricanes, even though he's not playing, but he's practicing and skating again, and with Dustin Tokarski putting up some fantastic numbers with the Hurricanes backup, he wonders if maybe the Hurricanes shift their focus from trying to go after a goaltender, given the fact they might have some more solid goaltending now than they did a little while ago with Kochetkov and Tokarski doing well, and maybe Anderson coming back in the distant future, and they may shift their forward to going for a skilled forward at the trade deadline. Now, we know the Carolina Hurricanes offense is not what it once was. They lost a couple of decent pieces this offseason, like a Teravainen. They were able to keep Jarvis and Necas, which worked out really well for them, but if they could add one more skilled guy, like sort of a Jake Gensel last year at the deadline, that could be a really good boost there for the Hurricanes. They still have a couple of really good prospects. They have some really good draft capital, so there's still a possibility there. I think that the Hurricanes could make some sort of move like that. So we have to see on that. We did just hear Carolina potentially has some interest in getting back in the Elias Pettersson sweepstakes after they were heavily in last year. So could that be a landing spot for Pettersson? It's possible. According to Seravalli, they may try and get to a skilled forward instead of a goaltender, and Pettersson is a very skilled forward. Other guys who could potentially be fitting the description for the Hurricanes would be a guy like maybe Brock Nelson in the Islanders organization, Taylor Hall in the Hawks organization, or maybe even a guy like Chris Kreider from the Rivals and the Rangers. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But with the Hurricanes goaltending position a little bit more secure now with Tokarski playing well and Anderson back on the ice, the Hurricanes may shift their focus to a forward, and they may try and acquire a forward before the trade deadline. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. Next, going over to my Ottawa Senators, we've got some some more reports from Ottawa, from Bruce Garrioch of the Ottawa Sun. He was talking about it. He's a very connected Ottawa Senators insider, and he says that there is very definitely talks about the Ottawa Senators moving on from Josh Norris. Apparently, the Norris contract has not worked out overly well for the Senators. He's making just a hair under $8 million for still 4 years after this year plus this season. So Norris is on the cap hit for quite some time, and apparently, according to Garrioch, he says that the Senators are trying to move off that contract from Ottawa. They don't want it on their books anymore, which makes sense as to why a lot of insiders such as David Pagnotta and Frank Seravalli have mentioned hearing Norris's name in trade rumors. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. But according to Garrioch, he says that Norris, who has not had a great season this year, putting up 14 goals and 23 points in 41 games with a minus 11 plus minus, has not had overly good stats this year, has not had overly great stats since signing that contract, which was a really good contract at the time because he had just come off a 35 goal season, but he hasn't been able to get up there since then. He suffered a lot of injuries, so that's why there's been so much talk about Norris being moved. Like I said, if Norris is going to get moved, acquiring a top four defenseman would be a really good boost for Ottawa. Garrioch says that they can't really move off anyone with this cap hit unless they're acquiring someone back from the team who's receiving Norris, so it's going to be a very difficult trade to do if it does happen, especially before the trade deadline. This might be more of an off-season move, but Norris has not had an overly great stretch in Ottawa over the past couple of years. With Pinto and Greig doing so well in Ottawa right now, it may make sense to move off Norris, get a little bit of cap relief, and maybe try and go after cheaper defensemen who can fit in that top four. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. But Garrett does report that the Sens are trying to get rid of the Norris contract, and to me that sort of makes sense with how poorly he's played over the past while, even though that has been due to injuries. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. Next, going over to Seattle Kraken. I was recently listening to Elliotte Friedman III Do Thoughts podcast. He was talking about a couple of things, but one thing that really did catch my eye was he was talking about the Seattle Kraken, and he says that the Kraken are a very interesting team. They're sort of starting to follow the playoff race. I think they're behind the Anaheim Ducks. They're not looking overly good. At the very start of the season, I thought they'd be in a race for a wildcard spot with teams like Colorado and Utah and St. Louis and Calgary, but Calgary's been doing really well. Colorado's been doing really well. Utah and St. Louis have been doing all right, but Seattle's really started to fall off a little bit, and that is what Elliotte Friedman to say that there's a very likely chance that will be sellers. He's heard names such as Oliver Bjorkstrand and Andrei Burakovsky out there as potential trade candidates for Seattle. Now, we've heard about Gord and Tanev. Both are pending UFAs. Both are not on overly egregious contracts, and if the Kraken will retain money, there's a very likely chance they could get some decent returns for them. But Burakovsky and Bjorkstrand are interesting. Both have term on their contract. I think Burakovsky has 2 or 3 years left on his contract at over $4 million. Bjorkstrand, same sort of thing. I think he has 1 or 2 years left after this year at over $4 million. Both are decent middle six forwards. Bjorkstrand, ever since coming into Seattle, has been a fantastic fit, being basically a consistent 20 goal scorer. He can put up 40 to 50 points. I think his peak is like a 30 goal season with like a 60-65 point pace. Burakovsky's not worked out overly fantastic, definitely been in the bottom six quite a few times in Seattle, and I can see why they may want to move on from him. Bjorkstrand's an interesting one, so we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. Like I said, Seattle's starting to fall off a playoff race. If they get far enough, there's a very likely chance that this team is going to sell some players, and Elliotte Friedman is hearing Bjorkstrand and Burakovsky's name on the trade market, so we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. Like I said, personally, I could see Burakovsky get moved, given the fact he hasn't been an overly fantastic fit, and given the fact this team has a whole bunch of really good forwards. Bjorkstrand's a little bit more of a puzzling name. Like I said, we still have some contract term left on his deal, so unless they're getting a really good return for Bjorkstrand, I don't think he gets moved. But we're going to have to wait and see. If there's a deal that blows away with Kraken, maybe he gets moved. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But Elliotte Friedman does mention Burakovsky, and Bjorkstrand's name is out there for the Seattle Kraken. And lastly, going over to the San Jose Sharks, according to David Pagnotta of thefourthperiod.com, he was recently talking about the San Jose Sharks and mentioned that the 2 names he's hearing on the Sharks blue line that are getting the most interest, because the Sharks are going to be a selling team come this year's trade deadline, are Mario Ferraro and Ceci. Both are solid defensemen. Ceci's entering the final year of his deal at just over a $3 million cap hit. We've talked about this before. Sharks can't retain any money because they already have their 3 retention slots locked up, so it'll have to either be at a full cap hit to move Ceci, or they'd have to get a third-party team involved to try and retain some money. But Ceci, like we said, is a solid third-pair shutdown defenseman. He doesn't do well in top 4 roles. We've seen that in Edmonton, but he can be a solid, serviceable third third pair guy, and I think it would work out really well in that sort of a role in a playoff team. So I could see a lot of teams have some interest in him. I know it makes sense as to why Pagnotta is hearing that he might be a name to watch out for when it comes to the trade deadline and the Sharks moving off some pieces. Ferraro, we've heard his name over the past couple of years. Last year, it sounded like it was more that a lot of teams wanted him rather than the Sharks shopping him, because Ferraro is a really good young defenseman. He's more of a defensive-minded guy. Won't put you up a whole bunch of points, but he's a really good top four left shot guy who can play really well defensively. So that's why he was so appealing to a lot of teams. But now he's only got this year plus next year left, I think, on his contract. He has a $3.25 million cap hit. There's a very likely chance to walk as a UFA next year if he stays in San Jose. So the Sharks potentially maybe moving him this year before the trade deadline when he still has this year plus next year left, sort of capitalize on his value right now. That could be a smart move for the San Jose Sharks. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But according to David Pagnotta, two defensemen that he's hearing the most of activity on when it comes to the San Jose Sharks is Cody Ceci as well as Mario Ferraro. So we're going to have to wait and see on what happens with those two guys, as they could potentially wind up being moved before the March 7th trade deadline. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But that's all I want to talk for today. I'll let you guys thoughts on all of this down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on all of these things that we discussed? Do you think the Sharks move Ferraro and Ceci before the trade deadline? And if so, what sort of return do you think they could get? And where do you think they could go? Do you think the Seattle Kraken could move Bjorkstrand and Burakovsky before a deadline? And if so, what sort of return they could get? Who could they go to? Does Norris get moved by Ottawa? And if so, what sort of return do you think Ottawa could get for Norris? Do the Carolina Hurricanes shift their focus from a goaltender to a forward? And if so, which sort of forward do you think they could target before a trade deadline? And do you think the Cozens at all gets moved by Buffalo? Personally, I don't think so. I think it's a possibility if there's a team out there who asks a high enough asking price. But personally, I don't see Cozens getting moved. So we're going to have to wait and see what happens there. But I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on Cozens. Plus, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on the waiver updates, injury updates, and signings from our past couple of days. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk about for today. We're going to tell you this video. If you're looking to subscribe below, thank you for your support. Know to of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget the subscribe button down below. Don't forget to comment down in the comment section below. So this is all discussed in this video. Also a blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. I recently did an update trade bait list blog, compiling a list of 20 players I think will get moved before trade deadline. So definitely check that out. I've linked to that down in the description below. And kind of see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.